Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into something pretty compelling, Florida's economy.
Yeah.
And there's this headline that really jumped out for the third year running. CNBC has ranked Florida as the best positioned economy for 2025.
That's quite a streak.
It really is. It just, begs a deeper look.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to unpack what this actually means beyond just the number one spot, and maybe more importantly, why it's happening.
Absolutely. And I think that's really our mission for this deep dive, right? To get past that headline number
Yeah.
and try to understand the engine that's really driving Florida's performance, what policies are behind it, and maybe what potential factors should we be keeping an eye on.
Okay.
The idea is really to give you, the listener, a comprehensive, clear picture so you feel genuinely well-informed by the end.
Okay, perfect. Let's unpack this then. Maybe start by grounding ourselves in the hard numbers. What are the actual metrics that, underpin this number one ranking? What are analysts like CNBC really looking at?
Right. The figures themselves are quite telling. So Florida's GDP, for instance, CNBC cites it at $1.34 trillion for 2024.
Okay.
But other data, specifically if you look at the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis and state sources, they actually put its gross state product even higher, maybe closer to roughly $1.705 trillion for 2024.
Wow, that's a big number, and quite a range between sources, too.
It is. But either way you look at it, it makes Florida the fourth largest economy among all U.S. states.
Fourth largest.
Yep. And if it were its own country, just for perspective, it ranks somewhere around 15th globally.
That kind of scale, does that bring unique challenges or maybe specific advantages when you're trying to attract certain industries or, manage that kind of growth?
Oh, absolutely both. Challenges and advantages. But focusing on the advantages reflected in the ranking.
Right.
Beyond just GDP, Florida got an A-plus economic score from CNBC. That was 363 points out of a possible 445.
Okay, an A+, sir.
And its job growth is strong, too, about a 1.4% annual increase. That puts it in the top 10 nationally.
Top 10.
And then, kind of the cherry on top, Moody's gives the state a AAA credit rating.
Which is the best possible, right?
Exactly. The highest any state can get. It signals, extreme financial strength, stability, allows the state to borrow money cheaper, which saves taxpayer dollars. So all these numbers together, they really do paint this picture of robust financial health. And that stability, that's a huge draw.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So here's where, for me, it gets really interesting. Moving from the what the numbers to the why.
Right.
What are the underlying policies? What's the sort of climate that CNBC is highlighting as being so critical for this success?
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it?
Maybe how does Florida pull off these low-spending, no-income tax policies without, gutting state services?
Yeah.
Especially with population growing so fast.
It's a great question, and it really seems to come down to this pro-growth environment that Florida's cultivated.
Oh, yeah.
CNBC points to things like a lean government workforce, relatively low debt per capita, and, crucially, as you mentioned, no personal state income tax. Plus, it keeps state spending per resident among the lowest.
So what does that translate to practically?
Well, think about it. Businesses keep more of their capital to reinvest. Individuals have more disposable income to spend or save.
Right, fueling the economy directly.
Exactly. It acts like a flywheel. It's not just business-friendly in a passive way. It's like an active magnet, drawing in capital, drawing in talent.
And you see that in business creation.
You do. Record-setting new business formation rates. It really fosters an environment that's, ripe for innovation, for expansion.
Yeah, so how do they manage the spending side then to avoid issues?
Well, the argument is that the state focuses its spending pretty strategically on core services and infrastructure that directly support economic activity, roads, ports, education to some extent. That helps balance the lower tax intake.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So these internal policies, they clearly build a strong foundation. But how does that translate globally? You mentioned Florida's scale. What's its international footprint like, its trade position?
Yeah, it's significant on the world stage, too. The state recorded about $185 billion in goods trade.
$185 billion?
Wow. Which is, almost 14%, 13.8% of its GDP. So trade is a big piece of the puzzle.
And is there anything unique about its trade relationships?
One thing that gets noted, particularly in the context of resilience, is that its imports from China are relatively limited compared to maybe some other states.
Interesting. So that limited China import, that's seen as a strength, a resilience factor.
Generally, yes.
Does that mean they might miss out on, say, cheaper goods or potential benefits from those markets?
Uh-huh.
Or is it mostly seen as a strategic positive?
That's a fair question. There are always trade-offs. But from the perspective of economic analysis, like CNBC's,
Right.
that limited exposure is framed as a cushion. It sort of shields the state, potentially, from volatility driven by tariffs or geopolitical issues involving China, more so than states with heavier reliance.
Okay.
So in terms of economic stability, especially in today's, sometimes uncertain global trade environment, it's seen as a strategic plus.
Understood. But like you said, trade-offs. And no economy is perfect, right? No picture is entirely risk-free.
Definitely not.
So what are some of the potential vulnerabilities, challenges people should maybe watch for with Florida's economy? Maybe things beyond just trade.
Yeah, this raises a really important point, and CNBC does flag a few things. One area they specifically note is Florida's reliance on federal funding.
Federal money, how much are we talking about?
Roughly 34% of the state's budget comes from federal sources.
A third. Wow.
Yeah, it's significant. And the biggest chunk of that is Medicaid, the health program for low-income individuals and families. That's about $34 billion right there. And nearly two-thirds of that Medicaid funding is federal money.
Okay, so what's the risk there?
Well, the dependency itself creates risk, right? If federal budget priorities shift or if allocations tighten up down the road.
Florida could feel that pretty directly.
Exactly. It's a potential vulnerability to keep an eye on.
That's a big one. Are there other, maybe broader macroeconomic things at play? Things that could affect Florida just like anywhere else?
Oh, absolutely. You always have to watch the bigger picture. Things like inflation, interest rates.
Right.
For instance, the latest CPI numbers for June 9, the Consumer Price Index, how we track inflation, it showed a year-over-year increase of 2.7%, and month-over-month, it was up 0.3%.
So still rising, even if maybe slower than before.
Still ticking up. And what that means for you, the listener, is that the cost of living is still climbing. It affects your grocery bill, how much you can save, everything.
And interest rates too, presumably.
Directly. Those inflation numbers heavily influence the Fed, and therefore interest rates, especially mortgage rates, which, have a huge ripple effect across the housing market and the broader economy.
And Florida's housing market has been pretty hot.
Exactly. So that's definitely something to watch. And then there's also regional competition.
Other states trying to catch up.
Yeah. You've got neighbors like Texas, North Carolina, which actually beat Florida for the overall top state for business climate this year.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And even states like Delaware, New York, they're getting aggressive with their own economic incentives to attract businesses. So Florida can't just, rest on its laurels. It needs to keep innovating.
Okay, that makes sense. So bringing this all together, what does it mean for you, the listener? Whether you live in Florida or you're thinking about moving, or maybe you just want to understand these big economic trends, how do these numbers, these policies, these risks, how do they actually translate into tangible impacts on the ground?
Right. Let's broaden the perspective a bit. As I mentioned, while Florida's economy ranked #1, it's worth remembering CNBC ranked North Carolina #1 overall for business climate. They highlighted things like workforce friendliness, specific incentives. Florida came in 3rd overall in that 2025 analysis.
Okay, so #1 economy, #3 overall business climate. Still very strong.
Very strong, yes. But the distinction matters. Now, for Floridians, or anyone interested in its growth, this economic strength has really clear implications.
Like what?
Well, a booming economy and a growing population, that naturally attracts more home buyers, right? Especially in those high-growth cities and suburbs.
Dries up demand. Prices, maybe.
Potentially, yes. And the sustained job growth we talked about, that supports both the residential housing market and the commercial real estate market, office space, retail.
Okay.
Think about infrastructure, too. They're expanding ports, airports. That fuels growth in logistics, warehousing, which increases demand for industrial land, business parks.
Like the whole supply chain benefits.
Exactly. And there's another angle. Florida's investment in things like lower tuition for higher education and school choice policies. The idea is that improves the long-term quality of the workforce.
Making it more attractive for businesses needing skilled labor.
Precisely. And it also boosts demand for housing near good schools. And then finally, you've got the ongoing effect of low taxes and those business-friendly regulations driving corporate relocations. big companies moving headquarters or major operations there.
Yeah, we hear about that a lot.
And that can really reshape the commercial real estate landscape in certain areas. So
Mm.
ultimately, Florida's repeat #1 economy ranking, it reflects this combination of long-term growth, relatively conservative government spending, and these very deliberate, business-friendly policies that are actively shaping the state.
Wow. Okay, this has been a fantastic deep dive into Florida's economy.
Hmm.
Really paints a picture where, you know, this success isn't just happening by accident.
Not at all.
It seems like a direct result of deliberate policy choices, combined with some inherent strengths. Understanding these deeper currents, I think it helps all of us make more sense of the headlines and see how these huge numbers actually connect to everyday life.
Absolutely. And perhaps as you think about all these layers we've discussed, it raises a kind of important question to maybe leave with you, the listener.
Yeah.
Given Florida's strong economic foundation, which we've clearly established, how will that reliance on federal funding we talked about and this increasingly competitive landscape with other states, how will those factors shape its resilience, its growth path in the coming years?
That's a really good point. How sustainable is the current model against those pressures?
Exactly. It's something to maybe keep in the back of your mind the next time you hear about these economic rankings. There's always more beneath the surface.